The air inside the room carried the faint smell of disinfectant, old canvas, and something metallic that never fully leaves training spaces where bodies collide for years. 3:17 a.m. The building itself looked asleep from the outside. Inside, nothing was relaxed. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, slightly unstable, creating a pulse in the shadows along the far wall. Every few seconds, the light flickered just enough to make movement feel delayed, like time itself was hesitating. No crowd, no official gathering. Only 6 men inside a space that was never designed for observation, only evaluation. Boots rested quietly on concrete near the entrance. Not lined up, not casual either, placed with intention. Authority was present, but silent. On the mat, 2 figures occupied opposite ends, not facing each other yet, not acknowledging the geometry that already connected them. One presence filled space by default. Height first, then width, then density. The kind of physicality built for environments where hesitation is treated as weakness and speed is measured in survival probability. Shoulders that had learned how to push through resistance instead of negotiating with it. Hands that had spent years closing around objects that did not forgive mistakes. The other presence did not try to fill space. It reorganized it, standing without theatrical readiness. Weight placed as if the floor itself was an ally. Breathing slow enough to look almost absent. No visible tension. No ritual display of preparation. Just stillness. Not passive stillness. Occupied stillness. The kind that makes observers unconsciously lower their own voices. One of the men near the wall shifted slightly, arms crossing tighter. Another checked his watch without looking down fully, the movement small enough to avoid becoming part of the room's narrative. No one spoke. They were not here for a demonstration. They were here to answer a question none of them wanted to write down. The decade outside this building was built on escalation. Cold War tension translated into everything: cinema, politics, training doctrine, identity itself. Strength had become language. Dominance had become proof. Systems trusted measurable output, force, speed, endurance, compliance under pressure. But some reports, unofficial and poorly categorized, kept repeating the same anomaly. There existed a form of control that did not escalate with force. It absorbed it, redirected it, sometimes erased it. The man representing institutional certainty stepped forward first. Not aggressively, not cautiously either. The walk of someone who has never needed to question whether physical engagement would end in his favor. Every step placed heel first. Ground claiming. Space announcing ownership. When he stopped, he did not square his stance immediately. Instead, he waited. A small psychological test. Would the other man mirror readiness? Would he show anticipation? Would he reveal preference? Nothing changed. Not posture. Not breathing. Not gaze. Only one thing moved. The overhead light flickered again. For a moment, shadow cut across the smaller man's eyes. When the light stabilized, his expression had not changed. But something in the room had. The large man adjusted his shoulders. Barely noticeable, but everyone in that room had spent enough time around conflict to recognize the first signal of expectation failing. He shifted again, this time settling fully into stance. Weight forward, ready to engage. Still, no invitation from the other side. The smaller man finally moved. Not forward, not backward, just enough to recenter. A step that did not concede space, but did not claim new space either. Neutrality weaponized. The observers near the wall exchanged no looks. But breathing patterns changed. Shorter, higher in the chest. The kind of breathing people don't notice until tension leaves or spikes. The large man circled half a step. Testing angle. Testing reaction. Nothing chased him. Nothing tracked him. Nothing offered friction. And that, more than resistance, began to create pressure. Because systems built on dominance expect opposition to confirm relevance. When resistance does not appear, effort loses reference. The large man extended one hand slightly. Not contact, range testing, distance mapping. The smaller man's eyes did not follow the hand. They stayed centered, not locked, Not soft. Present. The difference between looking at someone and registering them. Seconds stretched. Long enough for the hum of fluorescent lights to become noticeable again. Long enough for one observer near the far wall to shift his weight off his back heel without realizing it. The large man stepped in. Fast. Not reckless. Train speed. Direct line. A movement designed to collapse distance before analysis could happen. The smaller man did not step away. He did not step forward either. He rotated. Not enough to be dramatic. Just enough to remove alignment. The large man's momentum met something that did not resist, but did not accept the path either. Contact happened, but not impact. Friction existed, but did not accumulate. The large man disengaged immediately. Not forced, not thrown, but repositioned. He blinked once. A small thing, but in environments built on certainty, blinking becomes signal. He approached again, this time slower, more controlled, adjusting, already learning, but also already questioning. The smaller man's breathing had not changed. Not deeper, not faster, not sharper, still the same slow rhythm. The kind that belongs to someone not waiting for outcome, but existing before outcome. One of the observers shifted his stance wider, unconsciously mirroring stability he could not name. The room temperature felt colder than it had minutes earlier, or maybe perception had simply sharpened. The large man engaged again, this time with layered movement. Faint inside, angle shift, commitment from lower body. Real attempt now. The smaller man moved first, not reacting, pre-existing, like he had stepped into a decision already made. Their bodies connected briefly, then separated. No visible strike, no dramatic technique, just interruption. The large man took 2 steps back, voluntarily, but faster than his training usually allowed retreat to happen. He reset his stance, then paused, then reset it again. Small correction. But correction means assumption failed. The observers remained silent, but attention sharpened, because what they were watching did not fit training language. It was not winning. It was not losing. It was not even competing in the way systems define competition. It was rearranging. The large man inhaled deeper this time. First, visible physiological shift. The smaller man exhaled slowly. Not directed, not expressive, just continuous. Seconds passed, and for the first time since entering the room, the large man did not move first. He waited, and waiting was not something his world rewarded. The fluorescent light flickered again, and this time, no one ignored it. No one in the room would later agree on when the atmosphere actually changed. Some would say it was when the larger man stopped advancing. Others would say it was earlier. The first moment contact happened and nothing decisive followed. But in reality, the shift lived somewhere quieter, somewhere between breath cycles. The larger man inhaled through his nose, deeper this time, chest expanding with controlled discipline rather than instinct. Years of conditioning kept his posture stable, but something underneath had begun recalibrating. Not fear, not yet, but the first fracture of expectation. Across from him, stillness remained intact. Not frozen, not tense, alive stillness. The smaller man's weight distribution remained unreadable. Not light on the feet, not heavy into the floor, simply placed, like gravity had negotiated with him personally. The larger man adjusted his stance again, subtle outward rotation of the rear foot, hips slightly more closed. A decision to prioritize power over reach. A decision built on experience. And experience had rarely failed him. He stepped in again, faster this time, not explosive, efficient, the type of entry designed to overwhelm timing windows before they fully exist. The smaller man moved before collision range formed. Not backward, not sideways. Inside, the distance collapsed in a way the larger man had not intended. Not dangerous, but disorienting. The body expects resistance when mass meets obstacle. Instead, he felt absence. Then direction change. His center shifted half an inch off alignment. Half an inch is nothing in daily life. In controlled violence, it is architecture collapsing. He recovered instantly. Years of drilling refused to allow imbalance to show. But the correction cost something invisible. Certainty. They separated again. The room remained silent, except for ventilation cycling through old metal ducts. One observer swallowed, the sound louder than it should have been. The larger man circled again, slower now, eyes narrowing not in aggression but calculation. He was no longer testing the opponent. He was testing reality. Because the feedback loop he trusted, input, force, resistance, control, had started returning incomplete data. The smaller man's gaze never hardened, never softened either, just registered, like watching weather form. The larger man stepped in again. Different angle, lower center, shorter movement, more dangerous range. This time contact lasted longer. Forearm met structure, shoulder alignment tested, weight transferred. Then, something subtle. The larger man felt his own force returning toward him, not as pushback, not as block, but as redirection that removed purpose from his motion. He disengaged faster this time. 3 steps back, not tactical distance. Reset distance. He exhaled sharply. First uncontrolled breath. No one commented, but everyone noticed. The smaller man inhaled slowly. Unchanged. The psychological space between them grew heavier than physical distance. The larger man moved his neck slightly side to side, loosening tension, buying seconds, rebuilding narrative. Because combat training is not only physical preparation, it is identity reinforcement. And identity was beginning to lose anchor. He approached again, this time without feint, without misdirection, direct, honest. The kind of movement people use when complexity has failed and instinct takes command. The smaller man stepped forward at the same moment. Not faster, not slower. Same moment. Collision happened, but not impact. The larger man's forward drive dissolved into rotation he did not initiate. His foot placement changed mid-load. He compensated instantly. But again, compensation is confession. They separated again. The larger man blinked twice this time. Microseconds. But everyone saw it. The air in the room felt thinner now, like oxygen had been replaced with observation. He circled again, but smaller arc. Closer now, not hunting distance, trying to understand it. The smaller man remained where he was, because position was no longer geographic. It was conceptual. The larger man tried again. Layered movement, upper body engagement, lower body drive, delayed half beat, designed to break predictive rhythm. Contact, brief, controlled, then gone. No strike landed, no throw executed, no visible dominance. But something else was happening. The larger man's breathing now lived slightly higher in his chest, still controlled, but no longer invisible. The smaller man's breathing remained anchored somewhere deeper than muscle. One of the observers shifted stance unconsciously again, mirroring stability, borrowing calm, because what they were witnessing was not technique demonstration. It was system failure. The larger man stepped back further this time. Not retreat, distance for thinking. He rolled his shoulders once, then again, then reset stance slower, more carefully, like someone placing weight onto ice without knowing thickness. The smaller man did nothing, and that nothing was becoming pressure, because dominance requires reaction. Control requires participation. Silence offers neither. Seconds stretched, long enough for the fluorescent light hum to become background rhythm, long enough for heartbeat awareness to creep into peripheral attention. The larger man moved again, this time fully committed, not reckless, but decided. If control could not be found through adjustment, it would be forced through escalation. He entered fast, power fully aligned, structure committed. This was not testing anymore. This was assertion. The smaller man moved last, and somehow first. Their bodies connected centerline. The larger man felt structural alignment vanish, not break, vanish. His forward drive dissolved into empty vector. His balance corrected itself, but late. Half step, then full step, then stance recovered. He stood still, not by choice, but because his nervous system needed recalculation time. The smaller man stepped back one step. Not retreat, release. The room exhaled collectively, but quietly. The larger man swallowed, then inhaled slow, then slower, trying to bring internal tempo back under command. The smaller man watched, not as opponent, not as judge, just present. Seconds passed. Then something changed. The larger man did not step forward again. He stayed where he was, because something had become undeniable. Strength still existed. Skill still existed. Training still existed. But outcome prediction did not. And humans tolerate pain better than uncertainty. The fluorescent light flickered again. This time, no one looked up, because something far more important was unstable. Identity had started negotiating with reality, and reality was not negotiating back. The room had reached a point where movement itself felt like a decision that could not be undone. No one shifted weight. No one cleared their throat. Even the ventilation seemed to hesitate between cycles. The larger man stood facing him, shoulders squared, posture still disciplined, but something inside that posture had become fragile. Not physically, structurally, like architecture that still stands, but no longer trusts its own foundation. Across from him, the smaller man's presence remained unchanged. Not dominant, not passive, just unmoved by the need to prove either. Seconds stretched into something thicker than time. Then the larger man stepped forward again. Not fast, not slow, measured, intentional. This was no longer about testing capability. This was about confirming reality. The distance closed. Arms entered contact range. And then, the moment that would never be described the same way twice. The larger man initiated forward pressure. Not explosive, but fully committed. Everything aligned behind it. Structure, weight, training, history, identity. And then, the pressure disappeared. Not blocked, not deflected, not absorbed, removed. Like pushing against a door that silently opens before you feel resistance. His balance shifted forward into empty space. His body corrected instinctively. But correction requires reference. And reference had just vanished. A hand touched him. Not striking. Not grabbing. Not pushing. Touch. Precise. Brief. Placed exactly where structure becomes suggestion instead of certainty. His knee bent half an inch more than intended. His spine adjusted 1 degree off vertical. His weight transferred into ground he no longer fully owned. And then he was standing 2 steps back. He did not remember stepping. He only remembered arriving there. The smaller man was still where he had been. Not advancing. Not pursuing. Just present. The silence that followed did not feel like victory. It felt like realization. The larger man inhaled. Held it. Released slowly. And for the first time since entering the room, he did not move forward again. Not because he couldn't, because something inside him understood that forward no longer meant control. No words were exchanged. None were needed. One of the observers shifted weight unconsciously, like his body had been holding tension he had not noticed until now. Another adjusted his stance, mirroring the release without realizing it. The fluorescent lights hummed. The ventilation resumed full cycle. Reality, apparently, had decided to continue. The larger man nodded once. Not submission, not defeat, acknowledgement. Then he stepped back. 1 step, then another, then turned. Not rushed, not slow, just finished. The smaller man remained where he was for several seconds after the exit. Not watching the door, not watching the observers, just standing inside something no one else could measure. Then he exhaled once, soft, almost invisible, and stepped away. The observers did not speak immediately, because language requires conclusions, and nothing in that room felt concluded. One of them finally said something, years later, to someone who would repeat it carefully, unsure if memory had shaped it or if it had always sounded that way. He said it did not look like strength losing. It looked like strength being bypassed. Another would later describe it differently. He would say it felt like watching someone remove the idea of force without using force. No reports were filed. No official records were created. No training doctrines were rewritten publicly. But quietly, conversations changed. Training emphasis shifted. Questions appeared where certainty used to live. Because what happened in that room did not look like victory. It looked like a rule being revealed. And rules, once seen, cannot be unseen. Some would later wonder if it was real. Others would say it must have been misinterpreted. A few would insist it never happened at all. But uncertainty has a strange property. It spreads. It enters systems. It enters memory. It enters identity. And once it does, strength is never experienced the same way again. Somewhere, long after that room returned to normal function, someone would stand in front of someone stronger. And instead of thinking about power, they would think about alignment, about timing, about presence, about the moment when force stops being the deciding factor. And they would not know why that thought existed, only that it did. And maybe that is how some things survive history. Not as records, not as proof, but as quiet adjustments inside people who were never there. The building would eventually be renovated, the lights replaced, the floor resurfaced, the room reassigned to purposes that required spreadsheets instead of breath control. But space remembers pressure. And sometimes, if you stand very still in a place where certainty once broke, you can feel the echo of it. Not sound, not image, just the absence of something that used to feel permanent, and the uncomfortable awareness that maybe it never was.